Well, guys, how you doing on quiz 2? Good.
Need more time. Say,
Well, I just learned that I only had a extra 24 hours that was open past the due date. And for those of you who have accommodations, I put it out there. I bumped it up another day, from 24 to 48. And so turn it in when you can. It'll be, I think we'll go.
Working on it right now.
Okay, Blake.
Hello there.
Yeah, I'm liking this. And you just answered some questions. Can you guys hear me? And I'm saying, of course. And guess what? I can hear you guys too. So we're good. And so I wanted to start today kind of finishing up a couple of points about Greek art and architecture. And we kind of covered pretty well, I think, the archaic, geometric, classical styles. But after Alexander the Great, we have what there's called the Hellenistic style. We talked about that a little bit. I thought I'd bring in some, show some of the examples from the textbook to kind of back that up. And so here is the plan for the Temple of Apollo, Didyma, Turkey, begun 300 BCE, which is early Hellenistic. And I want to point something out here I think is really pretty important. First of all, it's in Turkey. And so what we find over time is that there are wars going on since even before we started looking at their art. The idea of a Trojan horse, you guys have heard of that one? It's a Trojan horse. Where is Troy? It's in Turkey. And it was a plan by the Spartans from Greece. And so this is a tale of warfare and tactics between those two countries. And they had been for a long, long time fighting over territory. And so anyway, this was at a time after Alexander the Great, and it was at probably the largest area expanse of the Greek Empire. And so let's take a look at this. And there's a really big difference between what we see here and what we saw from 150-ish years prior, the Parthenon. And that is, look at the columns. It has like rows and rows. It has many, many more columns. And so the architecture becomes much more complex. And so we see the rooms, we see everything. It's the same, really the same architecture, but it has been elaborated on. And so the same architecture becomes a little more complex. I had I'm going the wrong way. Here. And we also, with that complexity, have another order. We saw the Doric, we see the Ionic. This is the Corinthian And so, like I say, it's the same architecture, more complex. And take a look at this floral design. This is much more complex than anything we've seen prior. So the arts, the architecture, inventions thrive after Alexander. And this is, as I said earlier, Turkey. And this is a restoration view, basically computer generated image, but this is what they thought pre-N Turkey looked like 4th century BCE. And so the architecture, the sprawling they were organized, they were mathematicians, they were engineers, they were artists, they were physicians, they were astronomers, they laid the foundations for much of Western knowledge. And so here's another example of that kind of architecture where you see rows of columns, and then another row inside there, then the rooms. And in this case, instead of having just a roof on it, we have a second story. And so that's something you wouldn't see prior to Hellenistic architecture. And so anyway, you can hang on, zoom in here a little bit. So this is the scale. There are people here, but check out that compared to this. These are people roughly, say, 6 feet tall, 12. This is over 20 feet high. Just saying. And the altar of Zeus, Pergamon, Turkey. And so anyway, you see where this is at. It's in the State Museum in Berlin. Again, we have another example of how Europeans came in and they took this whole thing apart and put it back together in a museum. And so anyway, but look at this altar of Zeus, and it was in Turkey. And here are some of the sculptures from the frieze. And so this is what I want you to see about Hellenistic sculpture. See where I'm moving this? This is a very complex composition, wouldn't you agree? There's all kinds of things going on at the same time. And although this has been broken and things, you can still kind of get an idea of the naturalism, the realism, the movement in all of this, and even the expressions on the faces of the things. And so this is Athena, the one for whom Athens is named, but at any rate, and we talked about this one a little bit last week. Dying Gaul, another thing, pain, suffering, movement, naturalism. And so check out his hair. This is like really kind of an interesting part of this too. It's kind of more like hair we might know, instead of a bunch of curly stuff that's all like been at a beauty salon for about 2 days fixing it all up. No, it's like guy's hair, he's been fighting, he's been sweating, it's clumping up, and he's tired, and he's just about to die. And Nike alighting on a warship. And so that's really what this is supposed to be down here is the ship. Nike and Athena, they are kind of joined at the hip. This is the Nike that your shoes are named for. And Venus de Milo, another very realistic, another, although the arms are broke off, this is another one. They call it Venus de Milo. Venus of Milo. You know where Milo is?
No.
Italy. This is another one of those things that a farmer had dug up. He was plowing his field and a plow hit something too hard. It's like, what? There's something down here, and they dug it up. And so anyway, Aphrodite, Eros, that's him, and Pan, half goat, half man. Aphrodite, this were Roman, we'd be calling her Venus. And we've talked about Venus before, using Venus as the model and the name for a lot of fertility figures that we found from ancient cultures. Anyway. Sleeping Eros. This is another god that has a Roman counterpart. Eros. He is the god of love, the god of erotic love, and he is the one that inspires people to fall in love. And his name would be Cupid in Roman mythology. Sleeping satyr, again, naturalism, realism, seated boxer. Now, this is getting into the part that I really wanted to talk about today. I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to zoom in. Seated boxer. What do you think a boxer is? Same as a boxer today. Harder.
They make good underwear.
Oh, yeah. Unless you want to be brief about it, you know. So, anyway. Boxers are briefs. Yeah, kind of. But at any rate, look at this. This guy, he's an old boxer. And they did the same thing, you know, showed you the bull jumper from the palace of Knossos on the island of Crete. And we saw that guy jumping the bull with the other two guys, distracting the bull, talked about it, how it was a rodeo kind of thing, or more like a bullfight. Well, like boxing is an old sport too. And you can see here, instead of gloves, they had his hands wrapped. But I want to point out that like this guy is old and he is kind of over the hill. And if you take a look like here and there, he's got some scars. He is the old boxer. The old seated boxer, a guy that's spent his life fighting other people and for sport. And this is bronze. And bottom line, it's not that heroic thing. It's not that so-called ideal. And when you see classical Greek sculpture, it is about the ideal male form, the ideal female form. Everything is in proportion. Everything is designed for what we would call aesthetic purposes, beauty. By the time we get here, we're starting to see subjects and depictions that are not particularly really flattering and not particularly ideal. And there's a saying that comes out of this too. It's the idea that truth is beauty. And that's from Plato. Truth is beauty. And so when you describe a truth like this old guy who's been all kind of beat up over the years, tired, over the hill, it's truth. It's not ideal. But again, this is how things change in Greece. Check this out. Old market woman. And then there have been some people think she's an old drunken woman. You know, bottom line, though, look at this. She's poor. She's a beggar lady. She's got her basket, clothes are in tatters. Another old guy, less than ideal, not in the prime of his life, maybe so. And kind of lastly, the Lacawan group. And what this is Lacawan and his sons, and they're fighting off this big serpent. And a snake is like huge. Yes.
I've noticed a lot of like the past sculptures from this unit have had like snakes. Like, what's the significance?
Well, they more or less, and this is a traditional thing too, that snakes were feared, and because they inspired fear, we think that that's why they were so pervasive. And you can go back in and look at, for instance, King Tut's death mask, and it's got an ass on the headband kind of thing he wears. And so anyway, that was symbol of royal power. And fear this is a snake. Now what and then we saw in Minoan culture the snake goddess, and she had two snakes. Now here I think it's about fear, but it's actually in this case about vengeance too, and it's powerful. And the story here is, I was just talking about the Trojan horse story, and this guy, Lacawan, was kind of a high priest authority figure. And he was said to have alerted the Trojans that the Spartans were inside this Trojan horse. He was kind of a Benedict Arnold type of somebody that actually was treasonous to the Greek state. And as his punishment, the gods unleashed this gigantic snake to kill these guys. And so this is, in his own way, this snake is really vengeance from the gods. But it is really, I think the common thread here is snakes, fear, evil. And if you want to go into the Christian, Jewish, Muslim books about the Garden of Eden, they often depict Satan as the snake that convinced Eve to take a bite of the fruit of knowledge. And so anyway, yeah, it's not good. It's just not anything good. That was a great question too. And so, yeah. And what I wanted to show you here, make sure that Make sure I got my share right. Yeah, we're good. I wanted to show you this because this period, this classical Greek and Hellenistic Greek has kind of a profound effect for centuries. And so here's what I just showed you, the Lacawan, they call this the Lacawan group in some cases. But you see, we just talked about this. And the old market woman, another Hellenistic, the dying Gaul, another, and another. You see, this is all Hellenistic Greek slides. And so when we get to, this is the next chapter, by the way, or 2 chapters up, the head of a Republican priest, this is a Roman sculpture. You see, it's again not ideal. You can see he's got this kind of scar on his head. You know, maybe he got in some bit of trouble here somewhere. He's got wrinkles on his face. He looks old. He looks tired. He looks worn. And a lot of this would have not been possible had it not been for the Hellenistic period, where we start depicting things less than ideal. Here's another one. This is from Roman culture, and this is from a sarcophagus, actually. Funeral relief of a vegetable vendor. So I want to tell you about this. We think that whoever was in this sarcophagus may have been a produce guy, you know. So Carter, you brought me a ear of corn.
Yes.
This could be you.
I also work in produce.
Exactly what I'm saying. And you see here, and it's got this these bushels of vegetables and things and so on, some depictions of he's a vegetable vendor. We don't see that much in the way of artwork depicting common people, not like you're common, actually you're pretty extraordinary, but somebody from the everyday world. And so that's a Hellenistic tradition. This is a sculpture from the Renaissance, Donatello. You guys know Donatello, Ninja Turtle, just say. Named after, actually, the turtles are named after 4 great Renaissance artists, and this is the pure sculptor among that group, Donatello, Mary Magdalene. And you can see, this is not that ideal portrait of Mary Magdalene. Here she is, she's poor, her clothes are in tatters. She's prayerful, maybe repentant, maybe just sad. I don't know, but we have actually, there are a lot of depictions of Mary Magdalene. Even around here, we have a parish in Richmond Heights, Mary Magdalene, but their depictions of her are very different than this. And again, it's about that realism. And that's why I said earlier, the idea of realism is kind of a tricky word to use, because there would be all of these artists who would say, this is realism. This is what life is like, if you will. And so there's that old market woman that I was telling you about. This is actually a better picture of it. And so, yeah, Michelangelo, unfinished sculptures. And so I'm going to show you this. This is a sleeping satyr. This is Hellenistic Greek. And to some extent, what you see here is that this part of the sculpture is actually the shape of the rock it was carved from. And so one of the other, dare I say, Ninja Turtles, Michelangelo, he did these sculptures and they kind of sat around for hundreds of years and nobody really understood what they were all about. And they talked about them being unfinished. Modern day scholars think that these may actually could have been finished and to the degree that Michelangelo wanted. And the idea of showing both the rock from which the sculpture was made, as well as the shape the artist made from that stone. See here? We don't know, but we think they may have had some connection. I was talking about idealism too. Going back to classical Greek. Sometimes these things don't translate very well. This is George Washington, actually known as Enthroned Washington, a large marble sculpture by Horatio Green now. And it was commissioned by the Congress on Washington's birthday, 100th birthday. It was completed in 1940, exhibited in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol and moved to the Capitol's East Lawn. How do you think this went over? It was completed in 1840. Well, I brought this in to kind of emphasize my point about idealized. And this is Washington. Looks like him too. You can get a dollar bill out and check it. This is the guy, all right. But it's idealized. And in fact, he looks like he's a Greek or a Roman god. And they and in fact, when it was finished, they were talking about this being George Washington as Zeus, which is the Roman supreme god, the god of gods. And so anyway, a lot of people didn't like this. This was pre-Christian. It was the same kind of reaction that people had when Washington Monument was commissioned, that it was too Egyptian, too pre-Christian, and so anyway, we've kind of learned to live with this, but this is like the most unusual, I would say, depiction of George Washington ever, period. And this goes to idealism. And so I wanted to, but that's yet though, it is, let's see, there we go. And that means I gotta find another PowerPoint. Oh. Yeah, I brought this in too. And this is, let me make sure I got the right share. Yeah, it looks all right. I brought this in too, because I was talking about repatriation and stuff like that, the Elgin marbles from the Parthenon pediment. And here they are. This is what they look like in the British Museum. And they kind of separate them out and they're beautiful and everything here. But This is from Smithsonian Magazine, and this is a pretty interesting and I thought very even-handed account of the debate about the Elgin marbles and the repatriation of art and artifacts to their home countries. What ethical dilemma rules them all? The Parthenon sculptures, housed at London's British Museum. What is the rightful home of these friezes and metopes that once decorated the Acropolis temple of Athena? Athens, where they originated, or London, their home for the past 200 years. And so anyway, they kind of give you some things, and the United Nations Heritage Group, UNESCO, is involved with this. And so anyway, they're still debating this. This is a thing. And so if you want, it's on Canvas, and you can take a look at this. It's a pretty short read and very accurate. So anyway, we're getting to chapter 6. Wanted to really kind of go over that Hellenistic period, and I wanted to ask you guys, if I could. You remember when we were transitioning from Egypt, then we went to the Aegean cultures, then we went to Greece. Well, we have a similar kind of transition period or transition place. And that's the Etruscans. And let me make sure I got my share for the folks at home. Looks good. So what is an Etruscan? Kind of, but it's Etruscan that went digital. So they're like Etruscans. Okay, I know it's bad. You don't have to laugh. Thank you. Anyway, Etruscans, they were the civilization that lived on the Italian peninsula before the Roman culture evolved. And so with the Etruscans, it's really kind of what we talked about in the Aegean, the pre-Greek culture. This is the pre-Roman culture, and it existed side by side with Greek culture. Wasn't quite as far advanced. And an interesting little footnote there is that the Greeks were interested in conquest. And they sent armies out. Alexander the Great, the most successful of the Greek warriors, and he conquered lands that went all the way to the Indus Valley in modern day India. I mean, but the idea is that he went south and he went east. It was not a big impetus to go west. So the Etruscans were just there. They weren't threatened by the Greeks. They weren't worried about being overrun or dominated by them. In fact, they would just kind of work side by side. And they had a pretty good relationship, I would say. And they looked to the Greeks for inspiration on many things. And so anyway, there's those Elgin marbles I was talking about. Egyptian coffins. These are news things. Anyway, there it is. Italy in Etruscan times. And so you see, it is basically Italy as it exists today. Borders are a little different up here in the north, but here it is, the Italian peninsula and the Etruscans. And so you see right here, this is Rome right in the center, but bottom line, there was no Roman dominance to speak of. That will happen in a couple of 100 years. But in the meantime, we have all of these artifacts from Etruscan culture. And this is the interior of the tomb of the augurs. And we see this word here, it comes up all the time in Etruscan culture, necropolis. I told you guys what this last part, Polis, like Minneapolis and metropolis, and it means city. What is this NECRO, necro? Dead. Bingo, yes. It's a city for the dead, and they had an extraordinary, they had dedicated an extraordinary amount of their artistic energy towards memorializing the dead. And so they made these tombs, and in some cases, and you can see this is like cut out of rock, obviously, but they did paintings and they decorated these places and the city of the dead, and they would also fibula with orientalizing lions, Sorbo necropolis. And so, yeah, they, like the Egyptians, they would bury their dead with jewelry and other prized possessions. And so this is, like I said, this is where we get a lot of artifacts and where we see a lot of the artistic energy from the Etruscans, centered around the dead. Here is a model of a typical Etruscan temple. And you can see they do borrow quite heavily from Greek architecture. They got the pediment, they have the columns, they have the room, the interior rooms inside, but they're much smaller. And in this case, we see the color, but as I was telling you earlier, a lot of the parts, not everything, but in the Greek temples, the statues and other things were painted, so they were much more colorful than they appear. So this is what we think they had done, and adorn the temple with sculpture. Apollo. And so this is 1510, 500, excuse me, 510, 1500. I'm saying it again, I'm adding 1,000 years. 500 BCE, so 2,500 years old. And it does have some characteristics of some of the archaic Greek sculpture before classical times. And it does seem to kind of indicate some other influences from places actually farther east than Greece. But I want to point this out. It's actually the medium of choice, terracotta. See, this is life size, it's 5'11", painted terracotta. And you see most of the paint has worn off. Terracotta is really the most used medium in Etruscan art. And like every other culture, they use what is available. And so in Greece, they have tons of marble. In Egypt, they have tons of limestone and sandstone, and so on. And so anyway, terracotta, this is made out of clay. And again, sarcophagus. A sarcophagus is a tomb. We talked about that already. And look at this. Painted terracotta again. And it's kind of short. It's, well, it's 6'7". So yeah, I guess it's about right. 3.5 feet, almost a little over 3.5 feet high. But again, we think that these are death portraits of the couple buried inside the sarcophagus. And like I said earlier, they dedicated a lot of their artistic energy to memorializing the dead. And so those sarcophagi, if you will, would be inside these. They're kind of quasi temples. They're kind of quasi burial mounds. And there's these rooms on the inside, but they would have, that's it, the necropolis, the city of the dead, and that's what they call it. These stairs, by the way, add on. But this is what these necropolis sites look like. And this is the inside, interior of the tomb of the shields, chairs, and Tachia. And so, yeah. Elaborate. Inside these tombs, they made, I'll show you, this was a really elaborate one, Bantakatia. This is all sculpture. These are not like real things. They have pots and pans and knives and vases and rope, and in this case, a cat. Zoom in. Why would you keep a cat around? See, cats have been domesticated for thousands of years too, like dogs. Dogs more famously was a purpose for both of those. The dogs could provide protection, could actually use dogs to hunt and to track, and all of these things we know dogs can do. Cats, aside from companionship, they eat rodents. They keep the mice out. They talk about being as Bowsers, I should say, yeah. But at any rate, that's what that cat's doing there. That's keep the rodents out. And so anyway, got the shields, got all kinds of things for the dead. And as I showed you before, the other slide, they would have furniture. It was all not really furniture. It was carved out of stone, but this is what they did. And as far as we know, these were not pharaohs and high priests and priestesses. This is what they did. And so that is really their legacy. Interior of the tomb of the leopards. And look at this. This is like most amazing. And so I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. And so you can see here, I hope you can see this, but stylistically, this is a lot more like Greek painting and what little we know about Greek painting than it is Egyptian or any other kind of painting. These are all basically the kind of depictions that we would see in Greek art, and people like over here playing music and eating and having a good time. And they call this the room of the leopards because there's the leopards on top. Just saying. And another one. Let's zoom in. Again, just very influenced by Greek art, period. And diving and fishing, detail of the wall, the second chamber of the tomb of hunting and fishing. So here we go. There's a guy diving. There's some people in the boats and they're fishing, and the birds got a fish. No, maybe that's the tail of a bird. Anyway. Strictly Mediterranean. Capital Team Wolf from Rome. See, this is pretty old. It's circa Carter.
Are those humans under that box or horse?
No, they're bronze depictions of. I got you. Anyway, yes, the answer is yes. People, little baby boys. So, test your knowledge of Roman mythology. Anybody know who those guys are? Well,
One of them is Romulus, right?
and the other one's Remus. Yes, absolutely. They were twin brothers, Romulus and what did they do? That's okay. You already got you.
I know that word is human details.
Okay, well, let me fill it in then. Romulus and Remus, at least in mythology, they were the two brothers that founded the city of Rome. And the bottom line is that as babies, they were abandoned and adopted by this she-wolf. And she took them in as though she were wolf cubs and raised them, nurtured them, and they became grown men, strong men, two guys that founded Rome. Now, let me kind of elaborate on that little bit of mythology. Little Red Riding Hood. Guys know that story, right? Little Red Riding Hood goes to see grandma, but grandma was eaten by a wolf, and the wolf dresses up in grandma's clothing. And Little Red Riding Hood sees the wolf dressed up like Granny. He said, "Granny, what big eyes you have, what big teeth you have." And, you know, children's story. See, a lot of those, Carter,
It's hard to, that's for sure.
it is very hard to believe that is for children. Absolutely, but it's based on a practice, is what I'm getting to. And in ancient cultures, even up through medieval times, you would, what people would do, it's almost too tough to talk about. But if they had children that were unwanted for whatever reason, maybe a physical handicap, maybe just whatever reason, what you would do, what they would do, is take babies out to the forest and leave them. And wild animals would eat them. That's a real thing. And so that was pretty much the basis of this story about Romulus and Remus. So they, as babies, they were unwanted and were left out there to die, and they came back strong. We see those kinds of stories sort of play out in different ways, but you know, that wolf is really the villain in a lot of those old children fairy tales, you know. And it comes from that practice, you know. So that's it. That's what's going on here, Romulus and Remus. And here's another Etruscan sculpture. And you can see they're really pretty good at casting bronze, if I might say so. First half of the 4th century BCE. And this is a chimera of Arezzo, from Arezzo, Italy. Or Arezzo, I'm not sure. And again, another one of these hybrid animals out of mythology. And this is a very feared sort of lion creature. Tail is a snake. We're just talking about snakes and how they appear in ancient art. And so they were quite in line with what all the other things going on. Bicoroni cista. You know what a cista is?
In that particular spelling.
Oh, like brother, sister? Yeah, I got it. You good? No, it's a container for water. And if you have like grown up in rural America, you would know that there are places where farms where they collect water for drinking and bathing and stuff, and it's called a cistern. But this is a cista. It's the root word, and this is water. It's where you keep your clean water. And again, look at the etching, the detail. And to my eye, I still think there's a great deal of Greek influence here in that. And as you guys know, we looked at some Greek pottery. The idea of decorating everyday things, utensils, things used in the kitchen, things used to support life. Often they were decorated quite extensively. And so this is a cast bronze, it's a water container. And okay, I just wanted to check. I heard somebody check in. Chalice examining a liver. Chalice. Engraving on the back of a mirror. Examining a liver. What? Why would you examine a liver? Carter.
To eat it.
Yeah, it could be.
Ew.
Yeah. What am I? Chopped liver? No, never mind. Here is what I wanted to, that's why I'm pointing this out. The other day I was talking about the oracles and the seers from ancient Greece. And they had all different kinds of powers. And we talked about a little bit about looking into a crystal ball Or they would take an animal and pull the guts out, and they would look at the entrails, that's what the guts were called. And they would look at the liver taken from an animal, and they believed that they could foresee future events that way. And that's what's going on. Got the knife here, cut out the liver. And that's what he's doing. He's trying to be a prophet. He's trying to know something. And again, like I said the other day, we're all kinds of things. Some of these things are still with us. The alignment of celestial bodies, the stars can dictate or predict what happens, events and things. And so, Horta Marzia, 2nd century BCE. And you see this is all kind of what you call faux columns. That is that they're fake. But there's something in this architecture that's actually real. And that's this archway. And as we looked at Greek architecture and the post and lintel, and then it was expanded, by the way, that kind of architecture is called hypostyle. Doesn't have any walls, it's got columns, it's got a roof. The arch, it's one of the things that comes out of the Etruscan Roman architecture. And you see this is actually getting pretty close to being Roman 2nd century BCE. But here it is, arch construction. And so the highlighted part, that's what was different. Before this, we saw architecture in all of the cultures, basically post and lintel. What would be the advantage of this? Okay, I'll put on my engineer's hat and tell you. If you're an engineer or an architect, you'll know that if this were post and lintel, there would be a lintel right here. It would be this long. If you were to measure it, it's about half or 3/4 of the distance you would have here. Oh, darn. If you were to stretch this out, it'd be like 1.5 times or a little more. And so what you have here is that all of the weight coming from above is distributed over this longer area. And it'll hold more weight than would a lintel. A lintel is basically a strong cross beam, and that weight is all supported. Everything above it is supported over a shorter distance. This expands that distance and it's stronger. Does that make sense? All of the weight above this is held by stone that's approximately 1.5 tons stone. And it works, and it's worked forever. Oh, I know. And I'm gonna have to ask you guys to take my word on that. I thought I had some. We'll see that in Roman architecture. Big time, the arch. And so anyway, sarcophagus, again, very elaborate, very much the artistic production of the Etruscans centered on the dead. Another sarcophagus with portraits of the two people buried inside, and that would be kind of romantic, wouldn't it? Unless you didn't like your partner, then it would be the other thing, not heaven. Just saying. But at any rate, you know, this is what they did. And finally, the Roman Etruscan change. This is really the biggest connection. They have these memorial statues of their leaders, and they are mortals. They really are not Athena. They're not Apollo or Hercules. They actually start to make statues of their leaders. And in this case, you can see this is a wise and benevolent leader. We don't see that so much. We'll see some depictions of Alexander the Great, you know, and things in Greece, but that's not really a thing. Most of their sculpture depicts gods. And so anyway, Republican, what that really means. Donald Trump, no, not so much. Goes back farther than that. Republic, that was something from Plato. And republic means that that place, that republic, is governed by their own people. The public part of Republicans, everyday people. Hey, we're going to go public with this, put it online. That's the root of that word. And we get out of the Etruscan culture, the Roman Republic. We see the roots of democracy, which is the other ancient idea in Western government, which meant that the people could vote. And so we talk, and that was out of the demographics, comes out of the same word, people. But republic is more about the it's kind of along the same lines. That's why we have two parties. They mean slightly different things, but there it is. And we're going to talk about Rome on Wednesday. And so, well, I can give you guys, let's see, 9 extra minutes to work on your quiz. Because that's all I got for today. I'll see y'all Wednesday. Okay, you too. Good luck. You San Diego's where you going?
Yeah, I leave a week tomorrow. I'll be here next week on Monday.
Oh, okay, good,
Yeah.
good.